Dopamine has become synonymous with pleasure in popular understanding and the brain's reward system that lights up when you get what you want. Yet, right now, as you decide whether to continue listening or check your phone, dopamine isn't delivering pleasure. It's performing a more fundamental function, calculating whether the effort of sustained attention justifies the potential payoff. This calculation runs continuously, adjusting as your brain weighs the metabolic cost of mental work against uncertain rewards. The pleasure-based model of dopamine feels intuitively correct. When you bite into chocolate or receive a message from someone you care about, something in your brain does register satisfaction. This framework has been extended to explain everything from social media habits to consumer behavior, with advice to optimize dopamine for motivation and productivity. However, clinical observations reveal a more complex pattern. People with Parkinson's disease, whose dopamine-producing neurons progressively die, often retain their capacity for pleasure. They can still savor food or laugh at humor. What they lose is different: the drive to initiate action, to sustain effort, to decide that goals warrant pursuit despite the work required. Consider also the timing of dopamine release. Rather than peaking when you achieve what you want, dopamine activity is often strongest during anticipation and effort, while you're still working toward the goal. The system appears more interested in the process than the outcome. Work by researchers like John Salamone at the University of Connecticut, beginning in the 1990s, has mapped a different picture. Dopamine appears to function less as a pleasure signal and more as a system for evaluating effort costs against potential benefits. Your brain operates as an energy management system with constraints similar to an electrical grid. Just as power grids must balance energy supply against demand, monitoring load requirements, predicting usage patterns, and allocating resources to prevent overload, your brain faces parallel challenges with metabolic energy. Every action, from lifting your arm to solving a problem, requires glucose and oxygen. Neural circuits must continuously decide whether actions justify their biological cost. Dopamine circuits function as the system's control mechanism. Rather than simple pleasure switches, dopamine neurons operate like load-balancing algorithms that monitor energy reserves, assess task difficulty, and predict success probability. When grid operators detect high demand, they redirect power from lower priority areas. When dopamine neurons detect potentially valuable goals, they modulate neural activity to redirect cognitive resources toward those tasks. Salamone's laboratory work reveals something striking about this system. When researchers selectively damage dopamine pathways in animals, the subjects don't lose their appetite for food or their ability to enjoy it. They lose their willingness to work for it. Faced with easily accessible standard food versus preferred treats behind a barrier, they choose the easy option, not because they don't want the better food, but because their effort evaluation system is compromised. This operates through two primary circuits. The mesolimbic pathway runs from the ventral tegmental area to the nucleus accumbens and prefrontal cortex. The nigrostriatal pathway connects the substantia nigra to the striatum. While traditionally described as separate systems for reward and movement, current evidence suggests they function as components of an integrated effort evaluation network. The mechanism involves continuous modulation of neural firing rates based on cost-benefit calculations. When you encounter a potential goal, deciding whether to clean your apartment, neurons in the anterior cingulate cortex begin modeling task structure, breaking it into sub-goals like gathering supplies and clearing surfaces. Meanwhile, dopamine neurons receive input about your current energy state, estimated difficulty of each subtask, and potential value of completion. This represents patterns of neural firing that encode these variables as electrical signals. Crucially, this isn't a single calculation made at task onset. Teams at University College London demonstrated the dynamic nature using a grip strength experiment. Participants received either levodopa, which increases available dopamine, or haloperidol, which blocks dopamine receptors, then performed tasks where effort requirements change continuously. Under normal conditions, people automatically adjust effort based on available rewards, squeezing harder when more points are at stake, easing up for smaller rewards. The dopamine manipulations revealed something significant. People on levodopa showed enhanced motor vigor, squeezing harder for high rewards without conscious awareness. Those on haloperidol lost this sensitivity, applying similar effort regardless of reward context. This indicates dopamine neurons continuously update firing patterns that influence motor output and cognitive resource allocation based on real-time feedback about costs, benefits, and progress. The system employs hierarchical learning. Dopamine circuits don't just evaluate whether to start tasks, they monitor progress through each step, releasing phasic bursts when you complete sub-goals and adjusting baseline firing rates based on ongoing performance. When you make good progress cleaning that apartment, increased dopamine activity helps sustain neural circuits involved in task persistence. When you encounter obstacles on discovering you're out of supplies, dopamine activity decreases, allowing competing neural networks to gain influence in decision making. This explains why dopamine neurons fire most strongly, not at goal achievement, but during moments of uncertainty while working toward goals. They're not celebrating success, they're calibrating effort allocation in real time. The field has encountered what researchers call the dopamine paradox. This system appears to serve multiple functions that don't align neatly with any single framework. Studies of ADHD present one complication. Research by Michael Frank at Brown University suggests ADHD involves not simply low dopamine, but dysregulated dopamine, a system that struggles to properly weight effort costs against potential rewards. People with ADHD often hyperfocus intensely on high-interest tasks, while finding it nearly impossible to engage with necessary but boring work. This reflects an effort evaluation system that's been miscalibrated rather than poor self-control. Replication challenges have also emerged. Some classic studies distinguishing dopamine-driven wanting from opioid-driven pleasure have proven more difficult to replicate than initially expected. Kent Berridge's influential work at the University of Michigan, which separated wanting and liking systems, remains important but has required significant revision as evidence shows these systems interact more than originally believed. Individual differences add another layer of complexity. Genetic variations in dopamine receptor density and transporter efficiency create substantial differences in how people experience effort and reward. Individuals with certain variants of the DRD4 gene appear to require higher stimulation levels to engage their effort allocation systems, potentially explaining why some people seek novelty while others prefer routine. Tobias Hauser's research at University College London suggests the dopamine system can be trained. People can learn to find effort itself rewarding when the system repeatedly experiences effort leading to positive outcomes. The dopamine system can begin assigning positive value to effort itself, not just eventual rewards. We don't fully understand how this system develops across the lifespan. Adolescent brains show different dopamine activity patterns, which might explain why teenagers can demonstrate intense focus while seemingly unable to complete homework. The system appears to recalibrate during this period, learning new cost-benefit relationships as cognitive demands increase. Genuine mysteries remain. Why do some psychiatric medications that block dopamine receptors sometimes improve rather than impair motivation? How does the system account for social and emotional rewards that don't fit metabolic cost-benefit models? Why do people sometimes persist with tasks that rational analysis would suggest abandoning? Understanding dopamine as an effort evaluation system rather than a pleasure dispenser changes how you might approach motivation and productivity challenges. This framework explains why you can simultaneously want to do something while feeling unable to start. Your dopamine system isn't evaluating whether you'll enjoy the task, it's calculating whether the energy investment is justified given current resources and outcome uncertainty. Tasks feel more daunting when you're tired, stressed, or facing competing demands because your effort evaluation system conserves limited resources. The research illuminates why breaking large tasks into smaller sub-goals proves effective. You're providing your dopamine system with more frequent opportunities to register progress and recalibrate effort calculations. Each completed sub-goal generates dopamine release that helps sustain motivation for subsequent steps. This suggests procrastination isn't a character flaw, but a response from a system that's calculated the effort to reward ratio as unfavorable. Traditional advice to simply push through often fails because it doesn't address the underlying calculation. You might need to reduce perceived effort costs by improving your environment, skills, or energy levels, or increase perceived reward value by connecting tasks to larger, meaningful goals. The dynamic nature of this system explains why motivation fluctuates dramatically during single tasks. Your dopamine neurons continuously update calculations based on progress. When you encounter obstacles or slower than expected progress, motivation naturally wanes. This represents efficient energy allocation rather than personal weakness. For people with ADHD or depression, this framework suggests why certain interventions work. Medications affecting dopamine don't simply boost motivation universally, they recalibrate cost benefit calculations, making effortful tasks seem more worthwhile relative to their difficulty. The research hints at why external rewards can backfire. If your dopamine system learns to associate tasks primarily with external payoffs, it may downgrade intrinsic value calculations. This explains why paying children to read can reduce natural interest in books. You've trained their effort evaluation system to categorize reading as work rather than inherently rewarding. Your brain isn't a simple pleasure seeking machine driven by neurochemical rewards. It's a sophisticated energy management system that continuously calculates whether actions justify their metabolic cost. Dopamine serves as a key component, running real time cost benefit analyses that determine not just whether you'll start tasks, but how much effort you'll invest and when you'll persist versus pivot to alternatives. This isn't about chasing chemical rewards, it's about your brain making intelligent decisions about how to allocate your most precious resources, energy and attention. When you struggle to start something important, you're not fighting laziness or lack of willpower. You're negotiating with one of evolution's most sophisticated energy allocation systems, and understanding its operating principles can help you work with it more effectively.